So good morning everyone, and welcome back to our course on project stakeholder management. Today we will be starting lecture number 3. Two lessons already we have covered, in which we have done some basic introductions and looked at some basic concepts, some basic definitions. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to carry on from where I have left in the previous lecture. And you may recall that in the last lecture I had talked about the dimensions of complexity of managing and engaging project stakeholders. This was the very last thing which I had discussed, and you may recall this illustration over here which I had prepared for you, in which I had showed you that there are different levels of complexity when it comes to managing and engaging your project stakeholders. And there is no sort of straightforward template model where you can just come and you can apply it on each and every project. You have to look at each and every project in its respective context. And based on that context, you then have to come up with a methodology for managing and engaging your project stakeholders. Sometimes it can be a relatively quote-unquote simple task. Sometimes it can be quite a complicated undertaking, especially if you have very large projects with a very large number of stakeholders, heterogeneous community of stakeholders, geographically dispersed over a wide area, varying interests, often at conflict with each other, then it can be quite a challenge to manage and engage your stakeholders. Let us look at context A, what I call the low level of stakeholder complexity. In other words, it is easy, quote unquote, to manage and engage your stakeholders. This is project stakeholder management and engagement in its simplest form, which usually, but of course not always, occurs on projects which are conducted internally by an organization in one or more of its functional departments like accounting, finance, human resources, IT, and so forth. The focus here of management and engagement is to assign and coordinate project work among the stakeholders, overcome their resistance to change, very important, and motivate them to put in their best efforts to make the project a success. So you have to really convince people, you have to persuade them here that the project is in their best interest. It's not only about saying, we have a project, you have to do it, don't ask me any questions, just do it. But good stakeholder management, good stakeholder engagement is about actually explaining to them why the project is being done, how it's going to benefit them, how it's going to benefit their organization, how it's going to, for example, make life easier for them, less stressful for them, more enriching, personally, spiritually enriching for them. These are the things which good stakeholder management and engagement aims at, convincing people rather than ordering people or pushing people around. Context B, what I call a comparatively higher level of stakeholder complexity, more complex project stakeholder management and engagement, you will find normally on projects which are undertaken in a collaborative environment by multiple contracting entities. For example, if you are outsourcing your projects or part of your projects, maybe to one organization, maybe to multiple organizations, you have to coordinate among them. There has to be a certain level of communication, a lot of cooperation, coordination, and this is where more, you could say, difficulties or more challenges could arise in the management of the stakeholder community. Different organizations have got different cultures, might be located in very different places. Nowadays with outsourcing, outsourcing partners can be located thousands of miles away, different time zones, different continents. There's language issues, cultural issues, technical, logistical issues, and so forth. And all this can make the management and engagement of stakeholders a little bit more complex. So that is what one has to look more closely at over here. There's a higher level of complexity. Here the stakeholder management and engagement is not only taking place within an organization, but it's taking place across organizational boundaries. It's inter-organizational, which is of course generally more challenging than it is within an organization, intra-organizationally. As I said, more importance here is accorded to monitoring, communication, negotiation, trust and relationship building between stakeholders. And these are key terms in stakeholder management and engagement: trust and relationship building. That's what it's all about. When you enhance levels of trust, when you enhance the depth of relationship, usually then it becomes more easier to interact with and manage and engage your stakeholders. And context C, what I call context C, which is the highest level of stakeholder complexity. Context A, low level of complexity to a moderate level of complexity to a higher or highest level of complexity. This you could expect typically on very large projects, mega projects, construction, civil engineering, also major events. For example, Olympic Games, that is also a project organizing the Olympic Games, or organizing some big international conference, as well as development initiatives, development programs, development projects, some of them very large. Here the stakeholder management and engagement not only has the complexity of level of context B, which cuts across organizational boundaries, but also must contend with many non-contracting stakeholders which may support or in many cases often oppose the project. For example, if you're building a big dam somewhere, you will not only be having a very large number of subcontractors, suppliers, financiers, and so forth, but you would also be having a lot of stakeholders who might not be particularly enthusiastic about the idea. For example, environmentalists, non-government organizations, local communities of people who may be displaced by the project and who would have to be resettled elsewhere, and so forth and so forth. These are stakeholders which might not be very happy about your project and which would work against it. And there are many examples worldwide of such things taking place. So here in this highest level of stakeholder complexity, there are a lot of things you have to be very careful about. There is a need for caution, there is a need for consideration, understanding, and also creativity in how you manage and engage your stakeholders. Of course, at the bottom of it all, there should be an ethical, moral base, not to cause undue damage or suffering or other unfortunate things to people or to other entities which may be affected by your project. And this is a very difficult thing to do when you have so many stakeholders who all have got different interests, diverging interests, who sometimes are very difficult to reconcile with each other. So these are different complexity levels of managing stakeholders. Again, what I said is that there is no fixed model which you can just take and you can apply it on each and every project and program. That's not the case. You have to look at the context, the specific context of your project or your program on a case-by-case basis, on its own merit, and then you will have to decide how best to manage and engage your stakeholders. And that is why it's so important to have guidelines, to have a system in place which can assist you in this process of stakeholder management and engagement. Now, let me go again to some various aspects of project stakeholder management and engagement, some of the more fundamental aspects. First of all, the ubiquitousness of project stakeholders. I mean, we've talked in the preceding class about stakeholders and who the stakeholders are, why they are stakeholders, what categories of stakeholders are. And I also pointed out a couple of times, stakeholders have been around for a long time. They've been around for a very long time. And you could safely say that no project in history, and history goes back many thousands of years, from the dawn of mankind right down to our present era, has been stakeholder-less. There is no such thing as a project which has no stakeholders. I have not come across any. If you have, do let me know. You know, that will be a revolution here. And there is no such thing as a project which has no stakeholders. Whether it's a small project, small, very, very small project, or whether it's a project of the type which we just looked at, mega projects in construction or civil engineering, there is no project which has no stakeholders. So stakeholders are as natural to a project as are the conventional parameters of a project, and the conventional parameters are the goal, the scope of a project, you know, which leads towards the goal, the cost of a project, and the duration of a project. What we call the triple constraint, you know, the scope, the cost, and the duration. These are in every project, but also in every project you have got stakeholders. Stakeholder management is an evolving discipline. It changes with time, it evolves, it matures, it becomes better, it becomes more refined, more sophisticated. And as I also pointed out in the first class, I think it was, or was it the preceding class, that it has been neglected for a long time. It's been neglected by academics, it's been neglected by practitioners. But in recent years, there has been a growing realization of the importance of project stakeholder management. And this importance, this realization of this importance has manifested itself in a very large number of publications, research journal publications, a few books also, chapters in books, case studies, white papers, reports by consultants, by NGOs, websites. There's a lot of material, although as I also pointed out, it's all, you know, scattered in bits and pieces and has not really sort of, you know, come into a sort of a mass, systematic mass. This is something which I'm trying to take care of at the moment. If you want to look at the involvement of stakeholders in projects, and again, as I just pointed out, no project is stakeholderless, then it's best you should refer to this illustration which I have prepared for you over here. For those of you studying project management, you should know that a project has a life cycle, and every project has to go through certain phases. There is an initiation phase of a project, there is a planning or design phase, there is a execution or implementation phase, and there is a closure phase in a project. And of course, encompassing all these phases is monitoring, evaluation, and control. These blue boxes here in the middle of this illustration. You can see the project life cycle. Of course, projects don't just come out of thin air. They don't just materialize out of nothing. There is some preliminary work which is involved, what we can call the pre-project phase. When you conceive a project, when you have an idea for a project, when you start thinking about it, when you start conducting meetings, when you start conducting some research, when maybe you do an assessment or a feasibility or pre-feasibility and so forth. All this comes under the pre-project phase. These are the boxes, the three boxes which I have given at the top of this illustration over here. And after the project is complete, and the project is the outputs of the project, they go into operation, their outcomes and their impacts. This is the post-project phase, which can go on for quite a long time, depending on the project. So what we have got over here is a pre-project phase, which is before the project. We have the project life cycle, which is the project, and we have the post-project phase, which is the time which comes after the end of the project life cycle. And if you can see here on the right side, this circle, blue circle with the yellow border, this is where you have the stakeholders. And you can see the stakeholders, they are interfacing. In other words, they have a relationship, they have some involvement with all these different phases and sub-phases. Already when it comes to identifying a need for a project or mentioning that there is a want for a project, stakeholders are there. When it comes to the conceptualization and feasibility study for a project, stakeholders are there. And when it comes to all the pre-initiation activities, getting together the financing and sort of identifying who the project team and so forth, and signing all kinds of agreements and contracts, stakeholders are involved. And it's the same throughout the project life cycle. Who does the initiation? Who does the planning? Who does the execution? Who does the closure? Who does the monitoring? Who does the evaluation? Who does the control? It's all stakeholders. And later on, after the project has been completed, monitoring, evaluation of the outcomes and the impacts in the short, medium, long term is all stakeholders. Stakeholders are affected, and stakeholders are undertaking these works and these activities. So, and this is the basic model for each and every project. As I said, whether it's a small project, whether it's a medium-sized project, whether it's a big project, whether it's a commercial project, whether it's a public sector project, whether it's some NGO project, whether it's a mega project or some development project or program, in each and every project, in each and every program, you have got stakeholder involvement across time in all phases, in the pre-phase, in the life cycle phase, as well as in the post-project phase. The practical value. What is the practical value of managing and engaging project stakeholders? Why should we manage and engage them? Well, I think it should be fairly obvious, even at this stage now of the course, based on what I have told you in the last couple of lectures, and also now in this part of the lecture which we have conducted so far this morning. Project stakeholder management and engagement provides a sophisticated and evaluative framework for a rigorous, individualized analysis of stakeholders to an extent which is not possible in conventional management, which tends to view stakeholders in a macro perspective. If you take any book on business administration, and if you go through it, first of all, you won't find a lot of detail on stakeholders. Whatever information you find, you will find it in terms of broad categories, vendors, suppliers, human resources, of course, shareholders in a corporation, when you're studying finance, for instance, and so forth. But what project stakeholder management does as a subject is it goes deeper than that. It doesn't just look at categories, of course it does, but it goes deeper within those categories. When you are doing stakeholder analysis, for instance, you would be looking in great detail at the different, for example, suppliers you have got. There are evaluation models. How do you evaluate your suppliers? There are models, there are tools for evaluating consultants. There are tools, models for evaluating contractors and subcontractors, and so forth. All this is done in very great detail in stakeholder management and engagement, but it's not done in very great detail if you study conventional management or business administration. So this is one very big benefit of studying stakeholder management, is that it doesn't just look at the surface, but it goes down and it looks beneath the surface, and which of course can be a great benefit for your projects in terms of identifying opportunities, in terms of identifying risks and challenges. But of course, you must keep in mind that despite these benefits, stakeholder management also has some basic limitations. And it's just like all sciences, medical science cannot heal all our diseases. This is quite well known, psychiatry cannot heal all our mental problems which we have got. And stakeholder management and engagement cannot always guarantee you full success with regards to successfully, effectively managing your stakeholders. Managing stakeholders is extremely difficult. It's not an exercise in trivia. Stakeholders, they can have many different interests, and these interests can change over time. It's not such that you have a stakeholder who has a common position with regards to your project throughout the project life cycle. As I said before, a project stakeholder today might be very supportive. Tomorrow might be very opposed to your project for some reason or the other. Same way, a stakeholder who's very opposed to your project today may be very supportive of it tomorrow. So there are these constant, changes in attitudes, in behaviors of stakeholders which are taking place and which depend on many, many factors: information, experience, perceptions, expectations, and so forth and so forth. All these variables, they affect the attitude and the behavior of the stakeholders. And a good project stakeholder management and engagement strategy would be cognizant of all these changes and would try to come up with a mechanism in order to identify and to anticipate them and to act in a manner which prevents stakeholders from causing potential harm to your project. But sometimes it works. In many cases it has. Also in many cases it does not work. The positions are irreconcilable. In this case, you will see it's a big limitation of project stakeholder management and engagement. How do you manage and engage project stakeholders properly, appropriately? Well, the key to effective stakeholder management and engagement is to carefully identify and understand the interests and concerns which are shaping stakeholders' attitude and behavior towards the project, and to manage and engage these prudently and professionally over the project life cycle. This is what I had just pointed out to you, in other words. This is something which you have to spend a lot of time on as a stakeholder manager if you are undertaking this function in your projects. The logic behind project stakeholder management, well, I think it also should be quite clear by now, if you have been following what I've been saying so far. On all projects, stakeholders must be carefully and professionally managed and engaged so that they can contribute to the project, understand the project decisions taken, and accept them more readily, and that they will be project supporters instead of project adversaries. You have to deal with stakeholders. You have to take them into confidence. You have to manage them, engage them carefully, appropriately, justly, fairly, and try to convince them that the project is in their interests also, that they stand to benefit over time from the project, that they understand why the project is or has to be undertaken, and that they will also accept the decisions more readily. So all this is basically what stakeholder management tries to do. It tries to bring stakeholders on board. It tries to make them friends instead of having enemies around. That is the whole purpose of project stakeholder management, and at the same time it also tries to benefit the stakeholders. Okay, the project is being done, but at the same time the project can maybe be configured or undertaken in a manner which also brings benefits to the stakeholders. And when the stakeholders can see that they are going to benefit from the project, then logically, in most cases, they would tend to support rather than oppose the project. Centrality of stakeholders on projects. I have just pointed out a short while ago that stakeholders are universal. They're on every project and they're involved in all phases of a project. Before a project, during a project, even after completion of the project. So basically they are central to a project. And it is the stakeholders who are actually responsible for conceiving, defining, initiating, planning, executing, closing, monitoring, evaluating, controlling projects. There's a lot of work, but the stakeholders are the ones who are actually responsible for all that. And that is why I have been pleading that this conventional triple constraint of a project, the goal, scope, cost, and time, they should actually be converted into a rectangle or a square in which you have also got stakeholders. Or, as I have drawn it over here on this slide, you can have a circle with stakeholders in the middle, and you can have then a triangle with the triple constraint around it. But stakeholders, they are the central core of a project. Relationships, I told you, again just a short while ago, how important trust and relationship building is among stakeholders, in managing stakeholders and engaging stakeholders. It's about building, expanding, consolidating, and sustaining relationships. That is what successful project stakeholder management and engagement is all about. Building relationships where none existed, expanding and consolidating these relationships, and sustaining them over time. If this can be done within the context of project stakeholder management and engagement, it's very good stakeholder management and engagement. Building relationships is not easy. There are actually quite a lot of prerequisites which have to go into the equation. Trust, most important. Trust management, how you build trust, how you sustain trust. It's very difficult to build trust. It's very easy to break it. One has to be very cognizant of that it's a lot of hard work goes into trust building. Mutual respect, not a sort of a command, obey position, or I'm doing this, you have to accept it, whether you like it or not, but there has to be a sort of a mutual respect kind of relationship in project stakeholder management and engagement. Empathy, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand that person's feelings towards your project, to emphasize, to see things from their eyes, not only from your eyes, but to try and understand from their point of view, from their perspective. Another prerequisite, sincerity, integrity, of course, is very important. You know, when you are sincere, you really mean it. You say you want to build good relations with your stakeholders, and you really mean it. You're not just saying it, just as a sort of an eyewash, but you really do genuinely mean it. Good communication. Communication management is at the heart of stakeholder management, as you'll also see in later lectures. And it's a very complex, actually, communication. There are many different forms of communication. Listening is one very important form of communication. You listen to your stakeholders, you listen to their arguments, you listen to their concerns, you listen to their suggestions. And willingness to pursue constructive dialogue, to cooperate and compromise. In project management, when you're doing projects, sometimes you might have to compromise with your stakeholders. You say, okay, well, we understand what we are doing is going to maybe cause you or your environment a lot of damage. We will look at an alternative way. We will redesign our project, for instance, or we will reconfigure it in such a manner as it will both benefit us as project developers, and it will also benefit you as project stakeholders. Project stakeholder management and engagement is a collective responsibility. Please don't think it's just the function of the project manager or the project team or both. It's not. It is their responsibility, but it's not only them who are responsible. Managing and engaging stakeholders is not centralized. It is a shared collective responsibility. In other words, all stakeholders must manage and engage each other over the project life cycle. This applies particularly to the primary stakeholders who have some contractual, legal, formal relationship to the project. They have to practice good stakeholder management with each other. It's not just the responsibility of the project manager and the project team to go around and see that everyone is being properly managed and engaged, but all the stakeholders, the primary stakeholders here mainly, have to see that they all are practicing good stakeholder management and engagement. That's why, you know, there's a saying, the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. You might have many stakeholders, primary stakeholders in a project, most of whom are practicing very good project stakeholder management and engagement, but you might have a few or some who are not, and that can cause complications for the whole project. Win-win solutions. I had also pointed out in the previous classes the importance of win-win solutions. Win-win in this case means all the primary stakeholders are winning, they're getting something out of the project, as well as all the secondary stakeholders or internal and external stakeholders, depending on whatever categorization scheme you are using. It's most important that an attempt is made that everyone, all stakeholders, should to the maximum possible extent emerge as winners from the project. Frequently what we have here, if you look at this slide, is we have the bottom version. We have losers. The project is being done, it's not being done very well, bad stakeholder management, bad stakeholder engagement, stakeholders react negatively, a lot of tussle takes place. At the end, it's not only the project which suffers, also the other stakeholders who are all suffering because of their conflicts, because of the crisis situation, the tussles which are going on, and the lack of a proper system for managing and engaging the stakeholders to bring them together rather than, you know, seeing that they all stay apart. Often what we have on projects also is a win-lose situation, the typical case where you have some winners, you have some losers. Some benefit a lot from projects monetarily, reputationally, for instance. Others are losing a lot. This is of course not a very good way because we want to see that every stakeholder is to the maximum possible extent benefiting from a project. What we want to have here is the top version here, a win-win, where all the stakeholders are happy. Keep in mind that stakeholders normally support projects when they perceive that they will gain from those projects. That is, when they think that the net benefits which they will get are larger than the net costs which they will incur from the project. So there is this disparity. Benefits are high, costs are lower. Stakeholders will tend to support the project. Of course, if it's the other way around, the benefits are low and the costs are high, the stakeholders, if they perceive that, they will tend to oppose the project. And that's where one has to see that maybe one can come up with creative solutions, win-win solutions, that add net value to and are acceptable by preferably all or the largest number of stakeholders possible. This sounds maybe not so difficult, but it's actually quite difficult to do in practice. But this is something which normally really has not been looked at very systematically. And at the end of this course, what I want you to take away is also the idea that one always has to strive for win-win situations, for win-win solutions, and one should divert all one's creative energies into the pursuit and the seeking of win-win solutions. Stakeholder community means all the stakeholders, internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders. The stakeholders, or the primary and the secondary, whatever category you use, depending on the project, the stakeholder community, it can be very small, maybe just a few stakeholders, 2, 3, 4 stakeholders. It can be very homogeneous within a section or a department or an area, and easy to identify and analyze and engage, manage at the one end. At the other end, it can be extremely large. You have potentially millions and millions, even billions of stakeholders spread over a wide geographic area. Very difficult to identify individually, and of course extremely difficult to manage and engage. You have all kinds of communities of stakeholders, very small, very simple, very large, very complex. And of course your management and your engagement of stakeholders has to take these different community contexts into perspective and into consideration. Never underestimate your project stakeholders. One of the worst things you can do, and surprisingly this is taking place all the time on projects, even on big projects. Very few organizations, very few project implementers, planners have really come up with advanced or sophisticated systems for effectively and efficiently managing their project stakeholders, which is very surprising considering that vast sums of money are being spent on projects. Worldwide, it probably goes into the trillions of dollars, euros, whatever, every year. And given the centrality of project stakeholders, it's very surprising that even today, many organizations, many project planners, they always run into a lot of trouble because they have not properly studied or investigated their project stakeholders. And actually, if you look at the surveys, the project performance surveys, which have been carried out over time in many places, in many countries, in many different categories of projects, you will see that ineffective or inadequate stakeholder management engagement is widely acknowledged and empirically proven as constituting a principal cause of project failure. More often than not, it's not the technical issues which result in project failure, but it is the failure to properly manage and engage your project stakeholders. And there are many surveys which I have seen, which I've even collected in my database, where all the reasons are listed why the projects have run into difficulties, and usually at the top you find out it's always stakeholder related. Lack of management support or lack of interest, for instance. All these are principal causes of project failure. So projects which fail to manage and engage their stakeholders properly can expect to experience potentially very serious consequences. And the consequences can range from a project being late or delayed, schedule overrun, or a cost overrun. It could even range right up to termination, premature termination of a project, because there's been so much opposition, the opposition is unmanageable, and the project has to be cancelled, terminated, which of course results in a lot of wastage of resources which have been so far invested in trying to get that project up and running. And the later it happens in the project life cycle, the later the premature termination happens due to stakeholder opposition, then the larger the costs will be incurred. It's an exponential relationship. The costs of managing stakeholders and the cost of engaging stakeholders. Of course, nothing comes free in life, you know, good things, nothing comes free. For projects, there is a cost or investment, depending on how you look at it, which is involved in managing and engaging project stakeholders. Of course, you have to spend time, you have to spend money, you have to spend energy. All these are resources, and resources cost. That is a downside. Of course, there is also a return on your investment, quote, quote. And the return is that there is a much higher likelihood that the project will be completed within its set parameters, within its given time constraint, within its given cost budget, for example, within its given scope, requirements and specifications. So yes, you do have to invest in project stakeholder management and engagement. There is a cost involved, but there is also a return. And the return can be really justify the cost or the investment which has to go into this here. Of course, one has to see that the cost investment is commensurate with return. If it's a very small project, you would not like to spend twice or thrice the budget of that project on trying to manage and engage your stakeholders. It all has to be done within the project sort of context. You have to look at that carefully. A small project will require less effort, but a very large mega project costing billions and billions of dollars, you will have to spend a fair amount on managing and engaging your stakeholders. What are some of the costs for managing and engaging stakeholders? Well, if you've studied cost accounting, and project cost accounting overlaps with conventional cost accounting a lot, except that it's specific for the project. You will see that there are different categories of costs, like overhead costs and direct costs. Overhead cost or investment for an organization on project stakeholder management and engagement is for creating the framework structure. The framework structure, institutional committees, to look into how project stakeholder management and engagement is being conducted, to try and improve the processes, the methodologies, the tools, the systems in place, to conduct training for employees on project stakeholder management and engagement, and setting up a informational infrastructure for project stakeholder management and engagement. Now, these are the overhead costs which an organization can incur to set up a whole framework for all its projects or programs. At the same time, if it's a very large project, this then would be costs which are incurred within the framework of the project. Direct costs, focus specifically on stakeholders. Well, there can be quite a few. For example, specific processes and deliverables which are stakeholder focused. Unplanned modifications to the project scope based on stakeholder input and suggestions. When the stakeholders say, we don't want such a high building to come up in our area, it's too high, it's going to block our view, it's going to block out the light or the sunlight, whatever. And then in order to accommodate the stakeholders, one can say, okay, well, we won't build it so high, we will maybe build it a few stories less. So there might be some costs related there to redesign, for instance, or reshaping. Process modifications, process innovations to be more responsive to stakeholders, creating a stakeholder-friendly work and collaboration environment, a good working environment, nice space, nice lights, technology to communicate with stakeholders, as well as performance incentives in order to properly manage and engage stakeholders, to encourage employees and team members to properly engage and manage stakeholders, these kinds of incentives. All these could be coming under the category of direct costs, which are project specific, in order to properly manage and engage your stakeholders and try to accommodate their desires and their needs, maybe. So costs are there, and these costs can be quite substantive. On the other hand, as I pointed out, the benefits which are resulting therefrom also can be quite substantive. And it all boils down to looking at the context of your project and looking at your stakeholder community, trying to understand your stakeholder community, and then bringing all this into one framework, and then deciding on the best course of action, the best possible strategy to manage and engage your stakeholders. Some other costs which I have given over here: direct costs, hiring staff for stakeholder management and engagement activities, maybe a stakeholder manager on the project, training and educating project staff in project management and engagement, maybe sending them to a workshop. Having said that, there are not many workshops which are being offered on project stakeholder management and engagement, but if there are, this would then be one potential cost which could be incurred. Setting up infrastructure within the project, technical, informational, for managing and engaging project stakeholders. Actually collecting information, going out, finding information, different ways of doing it, conducting surveys, conducting interviews, collecting documentation, identifying, analyzing stakeholders, and then coming up with creative stakeholder management and engagement strategies. All these have got a cost with them, but as I said, they also have a lot of benefits with them associated. What happens if you don't properly manage and engage your stakeholders? Well, a lot of nasty things can happen, and some of them I have listed up over here. Well, loss of executive and collegial support. If you ignore your colleagues, if you don't properly brief your executives, don't report to them as expected or to the required extent, then they start losing interest, or they might even start getting a little bit annoyed, and that of course is a cost for the project. Unanticipated, undesired or excessive changes to the project scope. A lot of changes bring a lot of costs with them if there's constant changes. Delayed commencement or extended duration of the project and its work activities. Yes, this has a big cost as well as a time dimension. Overlooked requirements and specifications. If you do not properly consult with your clients, for instance, or your customer, what do you want? What do we have to do? If it's not done very systematically, what could happen is that some requirements and specifications might not be documented by the project team, by the project manager. The project is undertaken, and then later on it's found out that these requirements and specifications have not been met. Well, the reason they have not been met is there was not enough interaction with the stakeholders, or systematic interaction with the stakeholders. So this is a loss for the project because it has cost and time implications. Project design and execution deficiencies, errors and omissions, stress, demotivation, dissatisfaction, traumatization, emotional distress. These are all things which can happen if you do not undertake proper stakeholder management and engagement, and the list goes on, and you can see all these things which I have put over here. A big problem is mediation, arbitration, and ultimately litigation, which can spell a lot of problems for your project, which can perhaps even result in premature termination of your project. So this would then be a typical lose-lose situation here if you do not properly manage and engage your project stakeholders. Now, the last part, I would like to go into the relationship between stakeholders, stakeholder management, and the project management body of knowledge from the PMI, which many of you might have heard of. Many of you might even be interested in being PMI certified. It's a big craze in Islamabad at the moment. Personally, I don't know why, but everyone seems to be wanting to be PMI certified. I suppose employers are asking for it. What I would like to now look at specifically is the relationship between the 9 knowledge areas of the PMBOK, and the 9 knowledge areas are given over here, and the stakeholders. How do stakeholders interface, in other words, with each of these 9 knowledge areas? Well, they interface, and they interface often in a very complex manner, which is what we are going to look at now. If you take communication as the first of the 9 knowledge areas, communication is considered the lifeblood of a project. Just like in our human body, oxygen, is really the thing which makes our body run, which is carried by blood. Communication is the same in projects. It is the basis also of all stakeholder interactions. All interactions between stakeholders occurs through the medium of communication. So that is why there is a very, very strong degree of overlapping between stakeholder management and the communication area in the PMI's project management body of knowledge. And the communication takes place throughout a project life cycle. It takes place before a project, takes place after a project, and it takes place in many forms, in the written form of communication, the verbal form of communication, by listening, and also through body language, very important form of communication. Many project management performance surveys, project performance surveys, have indicated that communication shortcomings are a principal cause of project trouble or failure. Miscommunication or lack of communication, sometimes over communication or untimely communication, and so forth and so forth. A lot of communicational issues can occur on projects with regards to stakeholders, and this is why communication is very important from a stakeholder management and engagement perspective. If you look at this little illustration over here, which tries to convey to you the importance also of communication, you can see here this little illustration on the left side, on the top left side, this drawing, how the customer explained it, how the project leader understood it, how the analyst designed it, how the programmer wrote it, so it's IT-related project, how the business consultant described it, how the project was documented, what operations were installed, how the customer was built, that's typical, how it was supported is also typical, and what the customer really needed. This is in the bottom right. This is what the customer really wanted out of the project, and this is all what took place around it. So this also illustrates to you the importance of communication, and not only one-time communication, but also following up on communication. It's a very tough subject, actually, communication management. One might not think so, but it's actually quite tough. It's a very vast area also, and it's one of the most difficult things you can do in project management. Probably in most projects it is the most difficult thing you can do, proper communication management. Scope management, that is another area of the one of the 9 areas of the project management body of knowledge, project scope management. And it is really the project requirements and specifications, the project goal, which collectively determine the scope of work which has to be performed. All the work which comes under the scope is being done in order to achieve the project goal. And requirements, specifications are a very key component of the project scope. Now, who defines the scope? Who says this is all the work which has to be done? These are the requirements which are there. These are the specifications which are there. This is the goal, what we want to do. Who defines all that? It's the stakeholders, of course. And it's also the stakeholders who authorize occasional changes or modifications to the scope of a project. Often the scope of a project is not static. You don't start with a scope and keep the same scope throughout the life cycle. It can change. Requirements can change. Specifications can change based on new information which comes in, based on new needs or new wants which have been identified, or new technologies which might have evolved. So it's the scope which is dynamic, and it is the stakeholders who have to define the scope, who have to monitor the scope and who have to control changes to the scope. And if this is not done properly, it can have very serious negative repercussions for the project. If the scope has not been managed properly, it can result, for instance, in a massive cost overrun and also in a schedule overrun for the project. Cost management is another one of the 9 areas of the project management body of knowledge. Cost is one of the key parameters, as you know, in a project: cost, schedule, scope, conventionally speaking. Now, it is actually the stakeholders again who determine, who assess, and who revise a project's costs and also its benefits on the basis of available estimation information using estimating tools, processes. And it's also the stakeholders who monitor cost in relation to work performed. Now, if you studied project cost management, you'll know that there are quite a large number of estimating tools, top-down, bottom-up, and so forth, which give varying degrees of accuracy with regards to estimating the cost of a project. Plenty of tools. And of course, the cost has to be monitored, how much cost has been incurred and how much work has been performed for that cost. There are also tools for that, earn value, and so forth. And it's again the stakeholders' responsibility to estimate the cost of a project, to monitor the cost of a project, to evaluate how much work has been done in relation to the cost incurred on a project, and to control cost changes on a project. It's not something which it does by itself, but it's something which the stakeholders are responsible for. Time, like cost, is one of the key conventional parameters of a project. And again, it's the stakeholders, surprise, surprise, who determine the time a project takes to complete. How are stakeholders involved in time management, which typically we see as a very technical area? Well, it's the stakeholders who define the project's activities. They are the ones who say, these are the phases, these are the activities, all these activities have to be done in such and such sequence. They estimate the duration of the activity, how long they will take. They identify their dependency relationships. They develop the project schedule. They monitor the project schedule and they modify the project schedule when circumstances require. It's all done by stakeholders. Of course, there are technical tools available, software, the Microsoft project, Primavera, etc., which are used to make all these time charts, network diagrams, and so forth. But it's really the stakeholders who have to provide the conceptual input for that. Without the stakeholder input, this cannot be done. And all the estimation, activity duration estimation, cost estimation, dependency relationship identification, all this is done purely by the stakeholders. Risk management, a very technical area of project management, also one of the 9 areas of the body of knowledge. Risk is inherent to most, if not all, projects. Risks, if unmanaged, they can threaten a project's existence. Now, risk, when you talk about risk, you have to see that there are basically 2 types of risks. There are so-called positive risks, which are also called opportunities, and there are negative risks, which are the threats for a project. And these are the ones which we are more concerned about when we talk about risk management, although one also has to see whatever opportunities are there. Now again, it's the stakeholders who identify, who assess, and who prioritize a project's risks. Not all risks are the same. There are some risks which could be very serious if they really come to fruition for a project, and there are other risks which are maybe smaller, have smaller consequences. So it's really the stakeholders who identify, assess, and prioritize a project's risks, and it's also the stakeholders who develop and implement strategies to avoid, mitigate, transfer, or eliminate. When you study project risk management as a separate subject, it's a whole module in itself, then you will find out that all kinds of strategies have been evolved. to manage risks. And these are four basic ones: avoidance, mitigation, transfer, or elimination. And it's really the stakeholders who have to look at all the risks. There can be many, many risks on a project, different categories of risks. And they have to then decide, which risks are more serious, which have to be addressed more urgently, and how to actually deal with them. If you look at this illustration, which I have prepared over here, this is a risk breakdown structure. This is something which you would find on a project risk breakdown structure. It's one of the key tools in project risk management. Here you can see at this top box at the top, project risk. This is the sort of mainframe for covering all the risks. And the risks have been categorized here into, for this particular project, which is for the United States, Seattle Children's Hospital Research Institute, making this institute. Different categories of risks: internal risks, external risks, and technology-based risks. And each of these categories of risks have got subcategories and sub-categories. So these are all the risks which are relating to that particular project. And you can see over here, like for example, planning risks. Maybe planning is not done quite as it should be done, or managerial risks. There are some deficiencies possibly with regards to management, or there are some regulatory risks. The laws might change and that might make it more difficult for such institutions, and so forth, and so forth. So you have here a whole risk breakdown structure, and you have to look at that. You have to assess these different risks, you have to prioritize them, and then you have to come up with strategies for each of them, how you are going to do that. Of course, it's the stakeholders who have to perform this function here. Project quality, that is another area of the project management body of knowledge. How do stakeholders come in here? Well, the acceptability of a project's deliverables, technical deliverables, managerial deliverables, hinges on meeting quality criteria which are set by the clients and the users. Who are clients and users? They're stakeholders, of course. Stakeholders ensure that the managerial and technical processes which create the project deliverables meet quality standards and are continuously improved over time. So it's the stakeholders who set the quality standards for the deliverables, whether they are technical deliverables or managerial deliverables. It's also the stakeholders who monitor the quality and who ensure that the standards are being continuously maintained. This is where the stakeholders come in again. If the stakeholders would not do that, there could be very serious problems on projects with regards to quality criteria. Procurement, this is an area, again, one area of the project management body of knowledge, which interfaces very heavily with stakeholder management. Procurement management can be very complex on some projects when you have a large number of suppliers, vendors who are providing inputs, all kinds of inputs, maybe very small material inputs, maybe very large expensive machines. Procurement management typically entails inviting tenders and requests for proposals, evaluating and selecting prospective vendors and service providers, and administering procurement contracts over the course of the project life cycle. Well, again, this is all stakeholder related. You evaluate your vendors. Who are vendors? They are stakeholders. And you have to see that they are providing, delivering according to required specifications. You evaluate requests for proposals from service providers, for instance, from consultants. All this comes under procurement. All these are stakeholders. Human resource management, another area of the project management body of knowledge, very closely related to stakeholders. Why? Because the human resources on your project, the project team, support staff, they are key stakeholders. You have to recruit these stakeholders, you have to train them, you have to motivate them, you have to compensate them, you have to assess their performance, and you have to give them the requisite authority and the resources for them to do their work effectively and efficiently. Well, human resource area, human resource management is a sub-area of stakeholder management. Project human resource management is a sub-area of project stakeholder management. No project can be undertaken without human resources, which are key stakeholders on that particular project. We have covered these 9 areas, or 8 actually, because integration management is also one area, but it's not something really so relevant because it sort of binds all the other areas together. What we want to just now look at briefly is the subject of stakeholders and project portfolios. Portfolio, you might have already heard the term. Portfolio is a collection of something. A project portfolio is a collection of projects. A program portfolio is a collection of programs, and portfolios of course can have sub-portfolios and so forth, different categories of projects and programs. All organizations, whether they are public sector organizations or commercial organizations or non-governmental organizations, etc., all organizations, they have a portfolio of projects and programs at any given point in time. And the composition of this portfolio changes. You know, some projects are at an early stage of development, some are at an advanced stage of development. After some time, those at an advanced stage might go out of the portfolio when they have been completed and new projects are coming in. So there's always this dynamism in portfolios. Again, it's the stakeholders, in this case usually those stakeholders who are sitting at a very senior level, executive directors, divisional chiefs, CEO, boards, etc. They are the stakeholders who are responsible for selecting projects for inclusion in their portfolios, and if the need arises, for eliminating those projects prematurely. For instance, if they no longer serve a purpose, or if they're going to cause loss rather than bring benefits. So for all the portfolios, you have project portfolios, you have stakeholders here, senior stakeholders in this case, senior officials, who are responsible for selecting and for administering those portfolios. And portfolio management is a whole subject area of project management in itself, project portfolio management. The whole course modules have been developed on that. A very interesting one which I was attending as a guest in Maryland on project portfolio management. And all kinds of systems and models and tools have been developed in order to manage project and program portfolios. To be undertaken effectively and efficiently, projects need a comprehensive organizational support framework, which would include all these things which I have listed over here. Institutional system, for example, a program or project management office, standards for managing projects or programs, for example, this PMBOK of the PMI or Prince2. There are many other ones, by the way. Informational systems such as a project management information system. Incentive systems could be monetary, for example, also non-monetary. And last but not least, having a supportive organizational culture. Organizational culture is extremely important because it really sets the direction of how you think, how you behave, how you act towards your stakeholders. And if you have got a supportive organizational culture which encourages you to deal with and to interact with your stakeholders, to try and accommodate your stakeholders, well, that's a very good thing to have, as what every organization should strive for. So these are just some of the points which I have thrown in, and I think we have already covered quite a bit of ground in this class. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop, and we are then going to meet again in lecture number 4, in which we will continue looking at some aspects, important aspects of project stakeholder management and engagement. Thank you.